Can building, really quickly, this is what I'm going to show you how I made it. I'm not going to make this in front of you. I have a video of me making this in COVID, and I could post that video and then I would be done. I'll probably just make a new one to make a new video of me making something. So if you really wanted to follow a video step by step, because that'd be easier for you, then you could do that. Today, all I'm going to be showing you how to do is how to attach a corner. Like how to take two stiff slabs that are unbendable and how to attach them together. That's what I'm going to teach you how to do. Okay? It's not a difficult thing to do, but it's different than the way you've been attaching clay before because this clay is stiffer and we're trying to make sure it doesn't bend or warp. Okay? So, the way that I made this is I have like a cookie cutter kind of thing that's 6 by 6. I rolled a couple slabs probably, or one big one. I cut out 6 squares, one for the top, one for the bottom, 4 for the sides. I cut out 6 squares. I assembled it all together. Then, once I assembled it, I cut the lid like this. You can see I drew a line, I traced a line so I knew where I was cutting. I used a ruler to try to get straight lines. And then I took my X-Acto knife and I cut these lines in here, and that made the lid, so it's part of the box. And then I cleaned up the inside edges of the lid. I cleaned up the inside here as well. Ignore that it's a teapot, imagine it's a box. This would be the easiest way to complete this project. To fulfill all the requirements you need is if you made like a box or a rectangle, a square jar is probably the easiest thing to do. If you want to just get it done to get a grade because you don't care, that's what I would do. Make your own thing. Do something you like to do or something you're interested in, that's even better. But that would be the easiest thing to do. Okay, the stiff slabs, I did kind of an experiment. I rolled a bunch of slabs and then I left them in different parts of the room, wrapped up in different ways to see how they dry. Because the hardest thing about making this kind of a project is you need to dry the clay out exactly to the right moisture content. And so it's kind of like the Goldilocks and the Three Bears thing. It's like there's a bed that's too soft, a bed that's too hard, and a bed that's just right. Your clay can be too soft, like right when you roll it, it's too soft to work with. If you let it dry too much, it'll be too hard, and you won't be able to cut it, or attaching it is very, very difficult, and it's more likely to break. Just right, it's super easy, right? So the hardest thing for you guys, because you're here 1 hour a day roughly, is it's really hard for you to get it to dry exactly how you want because drying happens over time. So, like you might come in during flex time and roll some slabs and then leave them out, and then 6th period, they're ready for you to work on. You might roll some slabs during flex time, 6th period, flip those slabs over, put them in the orange room, and they're ready the next day. It depends on how thick the slab is, how wet the clay is that you start with. I can't just give you a formula. Do this, then that, and it'll be fine. Because there's too many variables. So I'm going to explain to you all the different things I did and tell you what I think works. But really it's up to you to figure out what is the perfect leather hard clay. How do I know it's that? And then you need to really make sure before you start building you have it that way. So first, I left clay out on a wheel here, and I just left this clay out overnight. So this would be the equivalent of you rolling a slab and leaving it out. Okay? If the slab was really thin, like this, and if you use a really thin slab to build with, it's a little bit more technically difficult. But if you're making something like a cup or a teapot or something out of stiff slabs, and you're going to pick up the object, like pick it up often, like a teapot, you might want to make it thinner. This is way too thin. The person who I had roll these slabs for me for extra credit rolled it too thin. Okay, but this is turning white. It's near bone dry. You won't be able to attach it. And one of the things we're going to do is we want to be able to slightly bend it without it breaking. That doesn't work here. So this is too hard. Okay? Now, I rolled a slab and I rolled this slab here, and I compressed it on both sides, smoothed it out so there's no texture lines, and then I immediately wrapped it in plastic, right? So it didn't dry at all, or it dried very little. This is too soft. I know it's too soft because I can easily stick my fingernail in it like that. I can smudge the clay with my finger and smear clay off. That's bad. And when I pick it up by like the corner, the slab bends. You see how the slab kind of like warps and bends when I pick it up? Right? So you can see that corner. When I lift it up, the corner bends. That doesn't work either. When I go to bend this slab, I can bend it and it doesn't break. See how much I bend it and it doesn't break? That's also bad. I'm looking for a slab that's just right. And the slab that's just right is going to be a slab that is not turning bone dry. When I go to pick it up, it picks up it like a board. It doesn't bend at all. You can see this slab isn't bending, right? It wants to stay straight. But if I really wanted to bend it a little bit, you can see on the camera that I can bend it a little. You see how it bends a little? Now, if I keep going, I'll do it on the corner so you can see. If I keep going, it will break. But it has that little bit of flex. That means the water content is just right. That's like the test, right? Just give it like a little bit of bend. If for some reason your clay is a little too dry, like this is too dry, this has no flex to it. It's the same color, right? This can be very confusing. It's the same color, right? But if you touched them, this one is a little sticky to your hand. It's colder, which means it has more water in it, and it doesn't feel as hard. This one, no flex. It just breaks. If I wanted to try to get this one to just the right consistency, I might spray water on it and then wrap it up. 10 minutes later, open the bag back up, all the water is going to be gone. Spray it again, wrap it back up. The next day you could maybe use it, right? Timing is tricky with this, but if you get it just right, it's super easy, okay? So that is how you know your slab is the right leather hardness, right? Those are the tests of too soft and too hard. Now, really simply, I'm going to cut this out. You have a choice. When your slab is really wet, like this one, you can cut out whatever shape you want, and it's very easy to cut it. But it's also easy to dent it and warp it a little bit, so you got to be really delicate with it, right? So if I wanted to cut a square out, I don't cut with these ones because it'll stick to here, and then when I push it, it warps it and dents it. So if I was using one of these, I would just push the corners down, push the sides down, and then pick it up, and it would leave like a trace line. And then I go back with my X-Acto knife and a ruler, and I would line my ruler up on that line, and I would cut it. I don't need to cut the whole square out for you to get the idea, but I would just line it up and cut it. Okay? Now, could you freehand cut it? Sure. I don't think that's a great idea, right? It works, but like the problem is that if you like sneeze or someone bumps you, or like there's a little something in the clay, or you know your knife slips, there's just so many things. Just use a ruler. Even though you have a line, it kind of wants to stay on that line. Okay, so I could cut this out, right? And if I'm a little off like that, you can see I cut it a little bit off. You can see the line there. Is that going to ruin everything? No, but now my box won't be perfectly square. All right, so when you are making a box, for example, you would need 6 of these if you're making a box. 1 for the top, 1 for the bottom, 4 for the sides. That's a cube. A cube has 6 sides, right? And they would all be a square. If you're making a rectangle, you would have 2 squares, right? And then you'd have 4 sides that were like long, taller than they are, or short, or whatever, right? And that would be like a rectangular box or a vertical thing. Or you could make something that was like a pentagon. There's like hexagons over there, right? It could have 6 sides, and then it would go up, and like it's just a shape in 3 dimensions, right? Geometry. So what's important though is when we build this, we cannot take one slab and attach it to the other slab end to end like this, like a right angle. it will throw off all your measurements. Because this is 4 inches. This is a 4-inch piece. And so the side of my cube is supposed to be 4 inches. If I attach it here, this length is no longer 4 inches. From here to here, it's not 4 inches from my thumb to my index finger. It's 4 inches plus the thickness of this, it's 4¼ inches. Right? And so you're like, okay, that I understand, like this measurement's 4 inches, this is 1/4 inch thick, that's 4¼ If I do that again, it'll be 4¼ on this part, but that will also mean that this slab that would go here would need to be 3¼ and then you wouldn't have a box anymore. Okay? Because the thickness of the material affects the measurement. So we don't directly attach it like this. That does not work. We have to attach it in a different way. It's not complicated, and it makes a lot of sense when you see it, but people forget this, okay? And then your box won't be a box, or your rectangle won't be a rectangle. We have to cut bevels or facets on here. Now I'm doing this with an X-Acto knife on this soft one, and it's really easy. On a firmer one, it would be harder. You can see I cut it, and I didn't cut it quite the same. It's hard to see on the screen, but you can see I cut this one, and I cut this one. They're not accurate. I can recut this one, and it's not exactly 45. I have a tool that cuts an exact 45. I just don't have it sitting here right now. We're not gonna it's an easy tool to break. So if we need it, I'll pull them out, but I don't have that many of them. But these are roughly 45s, they're good enough. The other way to do it is to use the Sureform. I have one here. There it is. This cheese grater thing that you were used to using on your coil pot, you can use it for this as well. I can hold this at a 45-degree angle, and I can shave away the clay to make a 45-degree angle. And I'm just holding it at what like a rough 45-degree angle would be. Okay? All right. Now, if I was making a cube, I would need to make 6 of these exactly like this. And what's happening is this here is still 4x4 on this side. So when I have my measurements and I put this piece next to another piece that is beveled, let me grab another piece that's beveled. Bevel this. I'd say that's good enough. When I put this next to this, that doesn't change the measurement because this point and this point meet at the corner and it's not sitting on top. That's what it was like before. This is what it's like now, right? So whatever measurements you took or you're gonna make for your box, you wanna make a 4x4 box, a 6x6 box, a 4x6 rectangle, whatever it is, when you attach it, your bevels are what are going to maintain your proportions. It will all be wrong if you don't bevel it, okay? Because the thickness of the material is going to change one corner's measurement, which will change the next, and all your measurements will be wrong, okay? So it's important. Now, I can do all that, but remember, this is my soft slab. This is my bendable one, right? This was the one that was too wet. You can do all this stuff on this now. That's an option. Or you can do that where it's on a stiff slab. The advantage of doing it on the soft one is it's easier to cut. It doesn't require as much physical strength, right? But it requires more delicacy. It's a more delicate thing. You can't be like pushing on it too hard. It'll bend, it'll warp. I could also put this on here, push down, or I could just like get a piece of paper that's cut out 4x4 and trace it, right? And now I have my outline of a square. And I could go back with my X-Acto knife, and I can line that up, and I can cut this one out. I just need to physically push harder with this X-Acto knife. The advantage to doing it this way is it's really hard to mess this up because I can't really dent it. It's not something I can dent, right? This softer one that I just did, it dents it. I can ruin that edge if I'm being clumsy. Whichever way you do it, measurement's important, the beveling is important. You can bevel this edge. I'm just going to cut this in half. And in half. Okay. So I can bevel this edge by cutting it at a 45 with this tool. This one's better. Right? Or I can take my Sureform and I can shave it down like that. Okay, so now I have two rough 45-degree angles, and I'm going to attach them like this. I'm going to show you how you attach them. This part should be very familiar, scratching and attaching using slip, subtle differences, and then the demonstration's over. All right, first thing, you want to use slip that is a little bit thicker than what you maybe are used to using because the clay is drier. So this slip here is very thick. It's like thick pudding. There's hundreds of pounds of this in class. Okay, if you go through the double doors out to the right, when I recycle all the clay, I first turn it into this and then I dry it out. So there is hundreds of pounds of this in big trash cans outside and troughs outside. Grab a bowl, scoop it into there, grab a little handful, put it in a bowl. It's just clay with more water in it. Maybe it feels gross to you. But you want this thick stuff, especially for attaching stiff slabs. So this is what's the same. I'm going to scratch. You need to scratch a little harder when the clay is stiff. I'm going to scratch above my scratch mark a little bit. You'll see why in a second. I'll do the same scratching on this one. This is why an exact 45 doesn't matter too much, because when you scratch it, it kind of softens it and you'll just push it. Okay? And so now I have both of these scratched. You can see they're scratched really thoroughly and a little bit deeper, right? Then on one side, I'm going to put a generous amount of slip. Generous. Like a lot. Okay? Then, if it's easier this way, like that, if you want, it depends on how big it is or whatever. You basically, I'm doing it this way so you can see on camera. You need to push these corners together and align them. So you align end to end, and you're going to push it together and then kind of wiggle it. Hold it for a second. Then you're going to go down, push it together, wiggle it, hold it for a second. Maybe you carefully flip it over. Do the same thing on this side, push it together, wiggle it, and you'll see the mud squirted out all the way around. Then I clean that mud up. I would clean it up on the inside. It's going to take about 2 to 3 minutes for that join to like get to about half strength. Right now it's very weak. I can just pull it right apart. Tomorrow it'll be really strong, but it has to fully dry. That wet clay has to take its water and spread it through the other slabs. It has to equalize its moisture content. Once it does that, it will be strong. Here is one of the ones I assembled yesterday that's bone dry now. There's a little bit of clay in the corner. I'm going to do that in a second. But in a perfect world, when I break this, it's like a wishbone. It should never break on this seam. It should break right above it or below it, because the strongest part is actually where I attached it, which it did. If you look carefully, you'll see it didn't break on the connection. It broke on the wall. It didn't break where they two meet. They meet at a diagonal. It didn't break there, because that's actually where it's thickest and strongest. Okay? If I try to break it again, I'm going to try to pry it and break it. Again, it broke on the wall. It did not break in the corner. This corner, your attachment, if you do it right, becomes the strongest part of your project. Okay? But it takes about a day. So now, this, I can still move this a little bit. I can kind of wiggle it. There's still probably some clay in there. I could push these together a little bit more. I could work on the corner. Okay? The only thing I would need to do is, you'll notice this corner, maybe it's not perfectly a right angle, so maybe I bend it a little bit. I try to straighten it up. Depending on what you're making, or if you just are afraid of your project cracking or breaking, you can scratch on the inner seam again, and we're gonna add what's called a healing coil or a bracing coil. So I scratched it there. I put more slip. If you cut these with your X-Acto knife and you save them, this little like angle that I cut off, that right angle I cut off, it is perfect to go right in here. You don't need to scratch it, just put it in there, push it down. This one's a little longer, right? I put it in there, it fills that corner. There's a benefit to this besides it making it stronger, making it less likely to crack. It also makes it so it doesn't have a really hard angle in there. Glaze will fit better in this corner if you do this healing coil. If you don't have that, you can just like roll a coil of clay and use a coil the same way and blend it in. But the benefit to doing that, that's done, that's it, is like if I was making the teapot, I don't want the tea leaves to get stuck in the corners because it's hard to clean out. If I put those healing coils in, it will round the corners out. So this corner here has a healing coil in it. This one doesn't. You see how that corner, it's like a tighter corner? It's like a right angle. This one is a lot softer. If you soften the corners on the insides, it'll be easier to clean, it'll glaze better, it'll be less likely to have a spot that doesn't get glazed or has dust in it. You don't have to do it, and it is one more step, but it will make your piece stronger, okay? When it comes to making a lid or doing other things, I'll help you out individually or as in groups, but the main part of this demonstration is learning how to take a piece of clay, this is the one from last period, this is the one from this period, and attach it together, 2 stiff slabs at an angle. If you wanted a more acute angle, like a narrower like angle like this, you would cut a greater angle. Instead of cutting a 45 like this, you would cut a wider angle or shave down a wider angle on both pieces. Then you put together like a star, the point of the star would be like that. If you cut it at a shallower angle, less than 45, it would make a wider angle. And you can shave it down for those specifically, but it's kind of like a guess and check to get it just right. Okay, all right, that's it. Any questions? That's it.